Hi, everybody. Welcome to the interview that we're doing today. My name is Neil Hilborn. I'm going to be your host, and I'm here today with Jalen Eutsey. Jalen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah. We're here to talk about your new book, but real quick, I just want to read your bio. Jalen Eutsey was a 2022 to 2024 Wallace Stegner Fellow at Stanford University. He received his MFA from the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University. He's been the recipient of a Ruby's Artist Grant and a Hattie Fitz Walker Scholarship from the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. His poems have appeared in the Yale Review, Best New Poets, Nashville Review, and Poetry Northwest, who was born and raised in Miami. Jalen, thanks so much for being here and hanging out with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Of course, I think we're gonna have some fun. So we're here to talk today about your book that's coming out today, the day that this is released. Bubblegum Stadium, right there. Incredible cover, by the way. I have a question about that later, but I'm super stoked about this book. I devoured it in one sitting. And it was nostalgic and it was beautiful, but also hopeful because like nostalgia can feel like a trap so often, and you
Mhm.
manage to do nostalgia but not idealize the past. Anyway, beautiful book. I love it to death. I got some questions for you uh to kick us off. I got some questions for you in a minute, but to kick us off, I think it'd be fun if we both read a little short poem.
I'll just read the first poem in the book. It's titled West Perrine, Florida. Bare, bird-chested boys play touch football in the street, reenact WrestleMania in the fenced-in front yard. When an errant pass rocks a mailbox, the whole block takes off running. After the game that never ends is paused, a swarm of sweaty boys meander to the corner store to buy a pickled egg, a hot sausage. At Galvez and B Seafood, they call the woman working behind the counter mommy and order kunk fritters with French fries. Squeeze lemon juice over the kunk, crisscrossing ketchup and mustard over the juice. Here, in this cutout between Hemingway's Key West home and Jenkins' moonlight, gunfire dapples the far-off night. One day, a man in a black Mercedes will inch up alongside and ask, "You working? Nah. You want to work? Nah."
Thanks. I love that poem. Yeah, sorry, I was just reading along the end of that. What a opener. Like there's a the simultaneous like joy and menace of like you want to work? Nah, like ugh, so good. I also love the specifically the way you read certain line breaks where you really wanted to hit him, where you were like touch football, right? Like it's good. I love when I can hear a line break,
Mm,
and
mm.
it's I heard it perfectly. This is Ed White Elementary, Seabrook, Texas, summer. It's 2002. I'm 13 and alive, and I just landed a 10 stair gap on my rollerblades. Yes, I know rollerblades. Skateboarding is hard. Jeff and I are out behind the elementary school where there lives the sketchiest staircase in Harris County. Cracked concrete, poorly patched with tar at the top, fitted asphalt strewn with gravel at the bottom. I'm skating harder than I need to because if I'm going to get hurt, I should get really hurt. I think a 540 is the one where you land backward, or at least I landed backward facing the stairs. I absolutely stomped it. First try, 13 years old, out there dropping hammers in my new Solomons. I'm going to be the next whoever is a famous rollerblader. I'm going to have a future containing tens of dollars. I spin back around, and there's Jeff skating towards me. No rips in his jeans, not yet, anyway. He wants a high five. His arms are full of flowers.
Thank you, thank you. It's a lovely reading. I love the end too, the turn and the beginning. The placement on the beginning is so well done. Of like this is where we are in time and space and location.
Thanks. So, first of all, for Bubblegum Stadium, I just want to talk about how both brave and terrifying it is to set an entire poetry manuscript in like one neighborhood, like in one geographical area. And because like it it would be so easy for it to feel stale or boring, but you never get there. There's always some new stuff to dig into. So is that in the writing of this, did you set out to have all these poems exist in this space, or did you just look at a bunch of poems and be like, oh, they're all they're all in the neighborhood? Like chicken or egg?
Yeah, thanks so much for pointing that out. That's like so true. I feel like almost nothing that I do is like consciously intentional. Like everything almost that happens in the poems for me is like accident and instinct and just like waking up on the right day and having like a clear enough vision to be like, oh, these two things like go together. So honestly, I started writing about Miami more once I moved out of Miami, once I moved to Baltimore for my MFA. I think I was like nostalgic for Miami in a certain way, but also I think I was seeing that there were similarities in terms of like redlining, and like where this concentration of like poverty and difficult circumstances are in the two places. And I think it like emboldened me maybe to write about the place, and also a situation. Basically, I was like my first year in the MFA program. I told myself I wasn't going to go home for winter break. I was going to stay there and write. And then like a week or two in, I'm like binge watching Game of Thrones, and I'm like basically depressed. And I'm like, okay, I have to go home. So I just hop on a plane, I go home, and then I bought a camera and I started walking around like Miami generally. I was walking around South Beach taking pictures, and then I was like started thinking about like doing a documentary about this semi-pro baseball team that my dad played on, the West Prime Hellcats, the Prime Hellcats. And I started interviewing like his former teammates and people who had played on the team before he joined the team. And so that sort of like kicked things off to some extent. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say I'm more struggling with how to write poems that don't fit into this locale. But I think writing poems in this specific locale felt pretty natural. It came pretty naturally.
Brad, I love by the way the honesty of like, I don't know, man. I was just doing it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I say all the time to folks in my workshops, like, if somebody wants to give you credit for some genius thing, you take that credit. They're like, hey, did you mean to have this triple entendre? Yeah, I did. For sure I did.
That's good advice.
But
I'll do that next time. I'll do that next time.
also I think that I at the same time I think that I don't know, it just sounded cool is also it's I think it's a perfectly valid and and I think really cool answer, because I think there's no reason to like mystify the creative process more. Like sometimes it just jumps out of your brain,
Mhm.
and that's awesome that you just had that line somewhere in you and it popped out. I'm curious about this documentary. Are you generally a filmmaker? Are you still making this documentary? No.
No, I mean, I don't know what I was doing. I kind of just have the footage and it's just sitting on like an external hard drive somewhere. But hopefully I can continue to like make use of it for poems or maybe contact someone who like knows how to edit or something and actually do something with it. Yeah, I mean, I think there seems to be like more interest. Like the poet and writer Rowan Ricardo Phillips has a book coming out, I think either this year or next year with FSG about kind of like history of Black baseball in America. So yeah, maybe there's like more interest for it and I can find like a home or a little assistance with making it happen. But I mean, more to the point maybe of the book, like I think it felt easy for me to write about this one particular place for the whole book because it's a really grounding place for me. And I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. I'm pretty shy. So I think there's a lot of distance, me being like at a distance from other people, whether it's like family members, people in school, whatever. And I wasn't like totally engrossed in the happenings, all the happenings of the neighborhood, but I think moving to this place was like walking into a living history, right? Like my mom grew up in the neighborhood. My dad moved to the neighborhood after he moved from South Carolina and joined his baseball team. So like, I'd be walking down the street and someone would be saying Little Hiller, my dad's last name is Hiller. I remember I was playing basketball in the park one time and my dad called me later and was like, somebody called me and told me maybe you should switch to basketball. Like, you seem pretty good at basketball. You might be better than you are at baseball. So just kind of like that kind of sense of community and connection to others, I think was really like grounding for me in a way. I think I have a tendency to kind of be in the periphery, and even in these poems, I'm kind of on the periphery a lot, but there was a grounding there that was really generative and yeah, good feelings.
Yeah, well, I think that I definitely got that sense reading it that it's a very documentarian sort of lens of like you definitely exist in these poems, especially the poems about your mom, like that like you are more of a character rather than observer. But what's fun is when you get enough of these sort of detached documentarian poems, suddenly you are actually in the center of the neighborhood because you're observing every single moment of it, right? I'm always curious about what if the first poem that ends up in a book is the first poem that you wrote for it, because the poem that you read is the first poem in the collection, is
Mhm.
that the first one that you remember writing for this? I'm assuming maybe not, but maybe it is.
I think it was one of the first. I think the first one was to my caring and worried mother. I think I wrote that my last year in undergrad. I stayed an extra year in undergrad because my mom worked at the school, so I was going for free and I didn't have to rush out. And I had no idea
Hell
what I
yeah.
was going to do after I graduated. So sticking around in school seemed great. But I wrote that in my last year in undergrad, and yeah, I think that was like an important poem for me, definitely. And yeah, I think it says a lot about like my style in the sense that like there's humor in it, but there's also this like sort of heartbreaking facing of reality. And I think, that's kind of tends to be how I like sort of face the world, I guess, with a little bit of humor. But also trying to look at the thing, that's something I'm trying to work on. I'm a bit of an escapist, so I'm trying to actually like look at the thing, the tragedy, the tough thing more. But yeah, I think that was the first poem. But West Bryan, Florida was one of the first poems, but it was revised over a longer stretch of time. So originally it was much longer. And then I just kind of cut out all of the language that was like not super fresh or anything like that. So, and then I sort of whittled it down to where it finally got to.
Brad, you heard it here first, y'all. Editing is writing. I feel like I say it every single day of my life, but poems aren't poems aren't done until they've gone through many, 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 many drafts. That's what I think. Anyway, um, who I'm always curious about the people, the writers that have inspired you. Like who were you reading when you were writing this book?
Yeah, I mean, so the funny thing is, it's like a short book, but I mean, this is like yeah, like I said, since like 2016, probably at least. So I've been working on it for a while. So yeah, I read a lot of different people during that time period, but definitely like some of the people that I mentioned in the back of book that are super important. I was reading a lot of Dinesh Smith, like Black Movie was really instrumental. Hanif Abdurraqib, I really love his work. And sometimes less so in this book, but sometimes I feel like I'm trying to make like a cultural criticism argument in the poems, and Hanif is obviously amazing at that. Terrence Hayes was really instrumental. Ross Gay, who else? Elizabeth Bishop, definitely for sure. So in my MFA program, I was introduced to her work, and previous to that, in undergrad, I was really studying like the French Surrealists, and everything was very associative, and like basically none of those poems are in this book. And yeah, so I was leaping around a lot from image to image, sort of associative, freewheeling language. And when I read Bishop, I kind of figured out how to stay on one topic for the length of a poem, and I think something about that, I guess, worked well with the material for this book. So yeah, Bishop was definitely a huge influence as well.
Is That is that why there are a bunch of sonnets in the book? Like as a sort of almost a self-limitation thing to be like, no, this has got to be short. You got to hit one thing and then get out. It or how did sonnets show up in your life, I think is the question here.
Yeah, so I mean, I think probably it has to do with like studying at Johns Hopkins, which has like a sort of formalist tradition to the program, and being introduced to the form there. But also, I think the sonnets came about there. There's some of the like older or newer poems in the book, I should say. So like that really came about from reading. I wouldn't say like Bishop is the main influence for those. I would say like Terrence Hayes, his American Sonnets. Diane Seuss, Frank sonnets. I read Ted Berrigan's sonnets, which are like wild. I read like a few of Gerald Stern's. Like I don't think I read the whole book, but I read some of Gerald Stern's sonnets. So I try to read a bunch of collections of sonnets and just like I was not good in math. I actually took math and French in middle school because I was in like an IB program and doing like a traditional sonnet, following all the rules. It feels like I'm in math class again, and I'm like, I don't want someone to call on me. So, I tried to just read a lot of sonnets, and I tried to read also about the form and older sonnets as well, and try to just learn through osmosis and let it get in, without trying to like follow the rules exactly. Because yeah, again, I think I get lost in the weeds sometimes with that. Hopefully, maybe down the line, maybe not. I don't know. Is it that important? I don't think so. But yeah. So that was kind of how the sonnets came about, and it's interesting because there is a part of me that's always like, will people respond to these? Is someone just going to be like, well, this isn't a real sonnet? But people seem to like them, so I'm happy that like kind of the study, I guess, worked well.
It worked great. It's 2025. Formally perfect sonnets. Nobody like Patricia Smith killed them with Blood Dazzler. She did it perfectly, and we were like, okay, great. So that's been done now, and now we
Yeah.
can just pick. I don't know. I always tell people when they're writing sonnets, like, okay, so here's the rules, right? Iambic pentameter. Here's the rhyme scheme. There should be a volta. Blah 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 blah. Pick some of them. Pick whichever ones stand out to you, and that's a sonnet. If Gene Toomer in like 1920 can write November Cottonflower and call it a sonnet, we can do whatever the hell we want with
Yeah.
sonnets, you know?
Yeah, and I tried to
I,
have like 14 lines more or less. I think all the ones in here are 14 lines. I'd have to double check. And then like a volta. The volta was really important because it feels like without the volta, I've taken too many of the restraints away and I'm like letting myself off the hook. So that was kind of like how I played it, I guess.
Brad, I mean, it worked great for me. I think I to the point that even if the title of those poems wasn't sonnet, I still would have looked at it and been like sonnet, and I would have counted lines, found the volta, and been like, that's a sonnet. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
thank you.
I like maybe maybe I'm not strict. Nah, whatever. There are no rules anymore. You just pick the rules that work for you. That's what I think. I've never read the Ted Berrigan sonnets. That's I gotta dig into that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think technically like New York School poet, sort of associative, wild. Yeah, definitely fun sonnets. And I've also like lately read more like Wanda Coleman sonnets. Like there's one that I want to teach that yeah, is just amazing. But I definitely need to like study them more. But those are the ones that I read around the book.
dope. Okay. So there's this book does have a very cinematic feel. Specifically, there are poems in it where like you have literally shot lists, right? I think there's at least one, if not multiple. Am I imagining that? Okay.
Yeah, one of them is Shotless, and then another one is titled Cinema Verite.
Yeah. So if this let's imagine that this book's turned into a film. It has a score written by an artist or composer. Who's that artist or composer? What's the score sound like for this book?
Man, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but I'll say, so I'll start by saying like Moonlight was a big inspiration for the book. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I think the main one is that like there is, I think the story of Bubblegum Stadium and, my life is one of kind of like, and my interest is in like the quotidian, like the everyday lives of, Black folks in Miami. in this one particular place. And a lot of the film and media about and around Miami is very like flash in the pan, very in your face, drugs, violence, big drama. And the movie Moonlight is not those things. You know, it's sort of like slow and poetic, and there's less dialogue than you would imagine. The colors are resonant and important to the narrative. And so that movie sort of like gave me the permission and like taught me how to write about like my Miami, the Miami that I like experienced and understood. And I like the way the music is used in that movie. I don't know. I'm gonna this is sort of like a cop out answer, but I'll just say Kendrick. I'm a big fan of Kendrick, and I I like to think that like some of what he does in his music is a kind of like similar approach to LA. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I love it. It's not a that's not a cop out. I love that. Okay, so we talked a lot about drafting and a lot and about how poems need a ton of work. How did you know the poems were done? What was there an event or were you just sick of them?
Mm. Um, Probably both. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think being a writer is like a strange thing. Like the original drafts of West Prime, Florida, I remember turning them in an MFA workshop, and people were like responding to it really well. And I was like, I don't really get this. Like, I feel like this was almost like out of like exhaustion or frustration where I just threw stuff on the page, and I like was just like what I don't know how to say this in a more interesting way, so I'll just like throw it. And people were interested, and I was like, but the language is like not that like interesting. I don't get this. And so yeah, I think sometimes whatever your skill sets are, a poet are sometimes a mystery to you yourself. And maybe you want to be a different kind of poet. You know, like I think there's a part of me that wants to be like Paul Beatty, like just virtuosic or Patricia Smith, right? Who can do everything, right? But I'm like, I don't know if that I've got those tools in my bag. And so I think it's a process of kind of like coming around to what's like resonating with people in your voice. Um, and then yeah, on the other side of it is just being like, okay, I've had these poems for a long time and like feels like, I think they're good. I think some of them are really good. Like maybe I need to put them in a book. I need to like do something with them. So yeah, a certain kind of sense of like, hey, like these are pretty good. Like let's get them out in the world.
The only thing I ever want as a reader is to feel cared for and feel like you took me into account and I felt like literally you were holding my hand and walking me through the book. So I you really did it. Well, these poems are done. What's the next project? What are you working on next?
Um, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think the what I'm working on next is like maybe trying to say the things that I haven't said before, maybe the things and the types of poems that aren't in this book, exploring more of that sort of associative lens. But also maybe, the book sort of ends in a place of looking at my religious upbringing to some extent, as a Jehovah's Witness. So maybe more of an exploration of that, presumably stepping outside of this like one neighborhood. I guess it would be cool to write about one neighborhood for the rest of my life. That would be kind of a flex in a way. But yeah, maybe like expanding outward and finding a way. I mean, I don't know. I'm like super interested to hear about your journey with like revision because it sounds like you said like you're an editor and a tinkerer. I think I'm those things too, but I think I almost didn't recognize at first that like how I was editing. So I was like, I don't really like editing, like, and now I feel like I'm editing a lot. I think most enjoy the kind of like jazz-like creation of the first draft where you're just like throwing stuff at the wall and it feels good. And sometimes the editing is like it's decision making. It's like craft, it's like grammar, it's sort of like less exciting stuff. But I think the kind of like the sort of subtle editing of like you wrote something in your phone and or you texted something to yourself and then you like copy the text and put it in a like a Gmail to yourself and you're like editing it in the Gmail and then you copy it from the Gmail and put it in a Word document. Like that, I think I've like taken for granted and like at this point in my career recognize as like all a part of the editing process. So by the time sometimes it gets to the Word document, it's already been fairly seriously edited and then you're doing like more edits there as well. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's totally like I write every first draft by hand in my notebook because one professor that I really respected in college told me to do it, and I've done it ever since because I think Marlon James is one of the coolest people on earth, and I never want to disappoint him. Anyway, so yeah, all the first drafts get written down by hand, and then just the process of typing it up
Mhm.
from the notebook, that's a major revision because sometimes you always try to turn off editing brain when you're writing a first draft because you're like I'm going to be perfectly creative, but it doesn't always work like that. So so in the draft I like put brackets around like
Mhm.
around things in the notebook. I'm like you'll probably cut this,
Yeah.
but like maybe that gets revised or something like that. But yeah, that's a draft going from the keyboard to the Google Doc, and then um I feel really fortunate that I get to like.
I'm like an anxious, insecure type, so I'm like not sending anything out unless I've kind of like gotten hands on it and feel like I've edited a lot. So yeah, I feel like the when I sent this like to Button, sent in for the competition for Button, like yeah, it was like pretty heavily edited and mostly what we did was add poems to it. There was definitely got edits and made some changes, which I'm happy about. But yeah, it was mostly like adding poems to it. But yeah, like you said, that like those subtle edits I think are like super important. And I think I'm like experiencing kind of like where you're talking about where the audience like acts as editor like through these interviews. I was interviewed once before. I've done one other interview for the book, and yeah, the cine like I think I like cinema. I like movies, whatever. I was aware of that, but at the same time, I wasn't. Especially since it's been so long that I've like had the project. I was aware of it maybe best in the MFA program, and then out of it, I kind of forgot that that was like a lens that I had been approaching some of the poems. So it's been helpful to like hear people pinpoint various things when talking to them.
Hell yeah. It's how many poem like you said you added stuff. How long was the manuscript you sent in for the chapbook contest?
It was like maybe 21 pages, you know? So
Sweet.
so like I'm like my approach is like all killer, no filler, So I'm like if I wasn't like completely confident in it, I didn't like put it in. And I was also I think the most difficult thing for me was like the shape of the book. I think that was like the thing that I like got feedback on to like uh potentially rearrange the poems and I was like, look, I've been rearranging this and unrearranging it for like a while. Like you need to like make an attempt. Like please make an attempt and I'll learn from your attempt. And I think it'll be easier for me to then see how I can rearrange it in like a way that seems best for me, taking like kind of like what I want from the attempt and leaving what's not there. But like, yeah, I feel like I had kind of gone like nose blind, I guess you could say, to like what was happening in the rearranging. So I was rearranging, but I feel like I wasn't feeling the effects of it. So I needed someone else to kind of like take an attempt at it to like see what it felt like from the other side.
Awesome. That you heard it here first, folks. If you're submitting to the Button Chapbook contest, just send your 20 to 25 pages of your best poems, and then you can add more later. Sorry, Button, if that's not what you want to do, but like, haha, it worked. So,
Yeah.
when some folks from my writing workshop were asking some advice about like the Button Chapbook contest, and that's basically what I told them. So it's nice to know that I'm not lying. So
I mean, I think that's like
um,
true of like all writing stuff. It's like what you're trying to do as a writer so often is just capture people's attention in a world where like there's phones and social media and everything. And so if you can capture someone's attention with your voice or your language or something, like they're gonna remember that and they'll be like willing to say, okay, maybe it's not all the way there, but like you've got something here that will resonate.
yeah, it's the lean in, I always say like anytime I'm workshopping somebody's like like a spoken word poem, I'm like, you need to have a hook in the first 20 seconds or the audience isn't going to hear the rest of your poem, you know? So yeah, you gotta it it's maybe if we're a bunch of Greeks sitting around in a long winter like reciting the Odyssey to each other, we're just like, no, we're listening to poetry, but like it there's phones, there's so many things to do. You gotta grab them.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Well, Jalen, this was so much fun. Do we want to read a poem or two to take us out? I'll
Yeah,
start this
sure.
time so you
Yeah,
don't so because you started last time.
sure.
Um, okay. I should have thought at all about what I was gonna do here, but I'm this poem's kind of about baseball and childhood. Here we go. This is one of the last poems in my book. It's about my cousin Zach. So I'm from Houston. We went to visit my family in Chicago all the time, and we just played backyard baseball in my cousin Zach's backyard. So this is Astros at Cubs, June 10th night game. In my favorite memory, it's 1998, and we're visiting family in Chicago. In everyone's favorite memory, it is always the late 90s. Cousin Zach has just handed out the baseball bats. No diamond can contain us, so we'll settle for this half acre. The crabapple tree has just shed its midsummer bounty, and Zach underhands one right to me. While the overripe fruit is suspended in the evening, let me say this. Even if I had the chance, I wouldn't be anyone else. Sure, I don't love myself, but I've come too far to start over now. So the crab apple is waltzing toward me, and I got so much time before it gets here. I could do my homework and clean up after dinner. I'm gonna grow up before I get a chance to hit this thing, but when it does arrive too soon, like summer, I demolish it. Absolute ripper, totally cranked. The too ripe fruit just explodes. I swear. It's like a movie. We stare at each other for a moment and then start cheering. Zach wipes pulp from his glasses. It's 1998 and I'm from Houston, so I holler, Jeff Bagwell. We're two boys unaware of the precipice before us. We're just running the bases. Lawn chair, tomato cage, shed corner, stomp home. I need you to believe me when I say this. The second the last crabapple has cleared the fence, the fireflies begin their dance to call in the night. I've never seen a firefly before. I call it a lightning bug, and Zach asks what that is. Nowhere to go but Chicago. No time like 7 minutes after sunset. Who could be me better? Why be anything at all?
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sort of messing up the run of show here, but I you mentioned the cover of my book earlier, and we didn't like get a chance to talk about it, but that's not
Yeah,
mainly why I'm messing up the run of show. It's
you can
because
always do it.
funny story about the cover. Button sends you the questionnaire about like what you want on the cover and stuff. And the thing that I said I didn't want on the cover was flowers because I'm not at the stage of the evolution in my life where I'm like a nature appreciator to the extent clearly that you are. Because I had your books and I was like, yeah, like if you notice in the book, it's a very like really suburban landscape because Miami is very spread out
Mhm.
and sprawling, so it's pretty suburban, but the nature that appears is almost always like almost infected by like the humanity and like I think I'm like really interested in like the detritus and like the trash in the street and like what's happening with the people in the like natural landscape. In the documentary, I took a video of this like hot Cheetos bag just kind of like flapping, and I mentioned it in the book. So it's so interesting that you were reading that poem and then that like came back to me that like yeah, I was like, oh, there's this other way. Obviously Ross Gay, huge fan of the flowers and nature. So I guess this is like a multi-part question of like, what help me on my journey of evolution to become a flower and nature appreciator. And also like Yeah, the narrative, I don't know. I have like a theory, I guess, but maybe I don't know if I want to share it, but just like the spoken word poets that I've read and come to love, they seem to have an ability to kind of like do the narrative lyric poem where it's kind of like a wax on, wax off Mr. Miyagi trick where something's happening over here and then something's happening over here and you forget about the thing happening over here and then you return to the thing. And sometimes it's not two actions. Sometimes it's like I think in that poem, like sports, and then like this maturation of a self coming to be. Yeah, how do you like juggle all that and move that through the page? You know, something that Button was like, maybe we can have some like longer poems. Like essentially, I feel like that's not a style of poem that I've done super well or often in my life. So yeah, I'm curious for tips and tricks.
Oh, for sure. It's I mean, the whole thing is just that is, I've taken to recently calling it like post confessionalism, because
Mhm.
like, confessional poets were like, this is my narrative in trauma, right? And then a bunch of like, who I'm just I this Sharon Olds would be mad if I called her a post confessionalist, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And like where it's like where they're like gonna talk about narrative, like go make sure every poem includes some kind of concrete narrative, right? But that but it might be super weird, or it might not follow an actual narrative structure. So I think that like what I've been doing, and this is just stuff I learned from the Twin Cities spoken word scene. I moved to Minnesota in 2007, and I didn't know anything about slam poetry or spoken word before I started going to poetry slams in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And the style that was really prevalent in the folks that were already really killing it there, Sierra DeMulder, Kari Jackson, Kyle Tranmere, were like they had I'm not going to call it a form necessarily, but a general structure down pretty hard of like at the beginning of the poem, you need to provide somebody with a few concrete details. You don't need to tell a full story, but in the first, let's say, two or three stanzas, you gotta clue the audience into why you wrote this poem. What's the event that what's the event that kicked this poem off for you? Like, why is it important for you to be talking about this? What's the YouTube video you saw that made you want to talk about your mental health? Whatever it is, like I need you need to like give me a concrete basis that I can understand the lyricism later in the poem when it shows up, right? And then sort of as a almost as a byproduct, that concrete thing that you referenced at the beginning can then become the callback at the end of the poem. So you're like, at the beginning, you're like, here's the narrative. Okay, here's my cool lines. Here's the lyricism and poeminess. And then that sentence that I used at the beginning to talk about going rollerblading, that sentence is back, you know? So it can get formulaic if you don't add your own stuff to it, but that's the sort of general thought, is like in the first few, especially when I'm doing longer poems and I know I'm going to perform, I'm like, the audience needs to know why I'm talking to them right now. And um and then hopefully they like the rest of the poem.
For sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I hope that made sense and I wasn't just babbling.
No, no, it made a lot of sense. It made perfect
All right,
sense.
cool.
And yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing about your appreciation for nature.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there, honestly. Like I grew up in Seabrook, Texas, which is the suburbs. And then I moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, which is not the biggest city ever, but I've always liked nature. I've liked camping and hiking. And being out in the world, but I've never been like real grimy until I but like my wife she's a country girl. She grew up in Dwaynesburg, New York, on 100 acres of land. And
Wow.
so I thought I knew about camping, but I knew about like bougie suburbs camping where it's like we have this nice tent and we have a campground and we have sleeping pads, and Annie was like, "Nah, you do you have like a mattress topper? You just throw it in the back of your hatchback and you go sleep somewhere, and then you wake up at dawn and you go for a hike to the waterfall." Duh, so I think like I thought I appreciated nature, but I appreciated it in a really pristine, sort of courtly way. And
Mhm.
so Annie's really helped me get to a place where like nature isn't precious. Like nature is a thing that I'm just part of. And it also helps that so we just moved to North Carolina a couple years ago, and we live like kind of out in the country. We live on like 4 acres, so nothing crazy, but like it's like where our house is surrounded by woods. And it's like we have neighbors, but they're through the woods.
Mhm.
And so like I just wake up, literally we wake up every day and just go out on the porch and look out in the woods, but like, can you believe we live here? It's like an Airbnb that like we'd be excited to come back to every year, but this is just our house. So I if I have any advice at all, it's that you don't that there's no like right way to appreciate nature, and that there's no like thing you gotta do to get into it. I think it can be just as simple as like, well, the closest state park is right out there, and I'm gonna go on a hike, and maybe my shoes aren't right for it, but when my feet start to hurt, I'll turn around, you know? Like,
Yeah.
um, also, there's a really cool app. This is nerdy, but there's a bird app called
Mhm.
Merlin, where you can literally it helps you identify. It's like a bird watcher app. It helps you identify what birds are around you by literally you just like start a sound recording, and it listens for all the bird calls around you, and then like pops up little pictures of them, and you just like drop a little scroll, and then it says gives you like, here's a picture, here's all of its calls, here's where it lives, here's its migratory patterns. So if you're nerdy and maybe a little autistic like me, you can dig into, like, if information is nice for you, all that stuff exists. There's an app for bugs. There's like Google Lens is great for just like looking at a plant, taking a picture of it, and tell you what the plan is and what you can do with it. So I like knowing stuff. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a way into nature, is just learning about it.
Yeah, I like knowing stuff too. So that's a good call out for sure. So I
Hell yeah.
appreciate that. All right. So
Go
I guess
ahead.
I'll
Well, do you
get
want to do a
on
poem?
things. So yeah, I'll read this poem's later in the book. It's titled West Perrine Park, the Big Park, and it has an epigraph by the sports writer Howard Bryant that reads, "It gave these black men their poetry." A white boy asked me to walk him to the bathroom before a baseball game at a public park where my father was once pseudonymed Myth. He ate the snake, and a generation of hellcats, Pee-wee, Crow, Romy, Termite, and others, had been good for pockets and bad for business as fans one ends on the weekend, betting and rooting for the home team. Everyone in their Easter Sunday, straight from the pew, alabaster best or home whites, swaying behind home plate and sprinkled down the right field line like sea foam teasing the shore, then decided to opt out of the grinding march of money making come Monday. What the boys seemed too afraid to understand was that all the men crowding around the teal, worn metal bleachers behind the dugout were arguing about the Dolphins, or playing the dozens, or sipping grape soda, or rolling bones, or narrating the sweat ballet unfurling atop the two-tone green and pink-red basketball court. And all those men would soon be rooting for him because he was wearing orange and green. What was unseen were the tightened black backs of the men who built the field he could now extend his dreams on. I think he homered that day, rounding the bases with a surprised smile as the Hellcats of old tapered a fade or faded from memory. He always played better on this hallowed ground he couldn't divorce from phantom echoes of bullets and blood. I walked the boy across the second unused court to the bathroom. our metal cleats tapping a tune of pregame buzz and jitters, while a mother weaved box braids into her daughter's hair down the left field line, and the memories of a milkman with no milk hung like fog in the air around the backstop. Bubblegum Stadium, they called it.
You literally just did the narrative lyricism narrative callback thing. You were like, the boy asked me to walk into the bathroom, and and because you place yourself in the poem, and then you're like, okay, so here's this backdrop of like a little bit of racial tension maybe, and here's a black experience, and then you're like, and then there's this fucking white boy, like, it's cool. You did it. So that's it. Just do that. That's how you write a slam poem.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think like something that's like interesting is like, yeah, just the way we see the world, right? Like, I think this person saw this place as like scary or like foreign and new and all this sort of stuff, and like didn't see that they literally always played better like when we played here. Like, I'm not someone who's like particularly like believes in like ancestors and ghosts or whatever, but like I guess I do believe that like, if there's like a history of like, like in basketball, like players seem to play better in the Garden because there's so much history there and they want to like be a part of that history. And so I think in the same way, and like this is like college club baseball. This is not well funded. We're playing on like high school fields and stuff. So, a sense you would think that a person would be sort of like appreciative of a certain amount of like pageantry that now we've got fences. So you don't, if you did hit a home run, you don't have to run around the bases so fast. So yeah, just kind of like not knowing that history and yet also kind of being a part of that history. So yeah, I felt like it was something worth exploring for sure.
It was great. It really, I mean, and you were doing the thing that I love in this book where you set yourself in the poem. You're like, I'm here, I observed this. Like, so you make yourself like a narrative authority so you can tell this story about your dad and the team, right? It was
Mhm.
great. It was really good. The list of nicknames just took me out, dude. Termite, like
Yeah, yeah. Thank
if somebody tried to name me Termite, I'd be mad for a little bit, and then I'd be like, actually though, I love
you.
it.
Yeah.
Well, Jalen, I had such a good time. I gotta plug the thing. Bubblegum Stadium comes out today. Go buy it. Go buy it from Button Poetry. It's right there. That's the cover. And it's still, oh, no, I'm ruining this. I'm gonna take it back. They can edit this later. I had a thing specifically that I was supposed to say, but it wasn't on this. It wasn't on this email. I'm just gonna redo that plug. And where Tanisha, where's the email? I should have. Yeah, okay, okay, okay. Yes, there it is. How to get the book posted on release day. Get it from buttonpoetry.com. Support National Poetry Month at the Button Shop using the code. Okay, cool, great. I'm gonna do that again. All right. Um, Jalen, thank you so much for doing this. Your book, Bubblegum Stadium, comes out today on Button Poetry. That's the cover right there, and you can get it. You can get it a bunch of places, but I like when you get it from directly from our publisher, buttonpoetry.com. And specifically, it's National Poetry Month. This is April, so if you want, you can get it. You can get it from Button on sale using the code NPM 2025 because it's National Poetry Month. It's April. It's the month that poets work the hardest. So that's what I think about that. How can people stay connected with you? Where can they follow you? Where are you most active?
Um, I'm on Instagram a little bit these days trying to get the word out about the book. It's at Jalen Eutsey, so just my first and last name, and that's pretty much what my handle is on any social media I'm on. So yeah, if you want to talk about the book or get off your hot takes about the NBA playoffs, I'm down for that. That'll probably be more fun about talking about the book. Buy the book, but then, don't talk to me about the book unless talk to me about basketball or something. No, I'm just kidding. We can talk about the book too.
Are you a Heat fan or do you have like a weird flyer.
So I am a Heat fan, but Steph Curry has stolen my heart. So I'm like a huge Warriors fan. So yeah, I'm just kind of riding till the wheels fall off, trying to get every ounce of joy of like watching this man be great and competitive and also play with joy and reckless abandon and also not be able to stop turning the ball over like he's, a sugar drunk 6-year-old, you know.
So yeah, you should get in Jalen's DMs, but just talk shit about the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
That's rad. Anything else you want to promote? Any shows you're doing? Anything you want to talk about that you're up to?
I'm doing a reading in Baltimore. Anyone, I guess, who's in the Baltimore area, I'll be at the Enoch Pratt Free Library on May 3rd, and then I'll be back in Chicago. I'm doing a reading at the Test Literary Reading Series on May 14th, and I'm also thinking to do a reading on May 18th at Cafe Moss in Chicago on the north side. So if you're in any of those areas and want to come out, please join. But if not, hit me up on online.
Rad. That's what you should do. And hey, if you ever find yourself in the Raleigh Durham area, come hang out. We'll show you a little bit of nature. We got a creek and we got a garden and we got chickens. So come hang out and we'll look at a tree together.